warm welcome, everyone, from Melbourne, from the beautiful city of Melbourne. Still wintry, still not much to report. On the other screen, you can see one of our favorite clients, Kenneth Marshall. Dzień dobry, Kenny.
Dzień dobry. Hello.
Kenny's actually based in Seattle, and we are very, very lucky to have him because in about a week he's going to be moving to Atlanta, I think. So he'll be less available. So we grabbed him when we could this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are in the world, to talk about his journey towards Polish citizenship. And it's been one that has been fascinating with lots of twists and lots of turns. So what I'd like to do firstly, Kenny, is tell us more about yourself, who you are, and how you embarked on this journey that's been a little bit crazy, I think is the best way to describe it.
Absolutely. Well, first off, hey, thanks for having me, Eva and Andrea. So first, a little bit about myself. My name is Kenny. I was born and raised in Idaho, of all the most unlikely places. And yeah, I'm a corporate trainer actually in my civilian job. And yeah, I live in Seattle. And when I grew up, I always knew that I had, Polish family, Polish Jewish family. And, I think as I started to get older, I just kind of wanted to get into it more, and learn a little bit more about, that side of the family, right? So I can think that's kind of how it all began.
Okay, and you embarked on this journey, I think back in 2014, I want to say, where initially we were hoping that you can get citizenship through descent, and that didn't work out. And then what I guess you decided to do, to dig deeper and first of all through ancestral records and looking for more information about your family. What happened there? If you could maybe explain to us briefly, about what happened.
Sure thing. So, to be honest with you, Ava, I started with a photograph of my great grandma and my mom, and it said, Grandma Esther, born in Poland. And beyond that, I didn't know what town, what area. And I was, really fortunate, of course, working with Polaron's research team, to kind of identify like, well, where should I start looking? Looking at different records to try and find that town name, really. And what I've learned, my own personal experience is that once you find the town, that's kind of like the key. We found out that my great grandma came from this beautiful city called Częstochowa. And once I got there, there was an amazing research group that was working on digitizing and cataloging everything within the archives. So immediately, from going to a name in a city, I suddenly had tens of thousands of records, about my great grandma, and her family. And so, I went from, 4 generations to 8 generations overnight, essentially. It was very incredible.
Mm. So how far have you been able to go back? What's the oldest record you've been able to find?
The oldest record, I think, would probably be, I think, my 5th great grandfather, Leiser Schlimmer, I think he was born in 1795.
Wow.
And we know that from my 4th great grandfather's marriage record, where they list their parents and their info.
Mm. And a lot of these records, Kenny, are actually in languages other than Polish even. So they're in Latin, some are in Russian, some are in Yiddish. How do you navigate? Because I know that a lot of this work you're doing in your sort of spare time, and it's pretty full on in terms of trying to understand what they say. The handwriting is very scribbled. It's very hard to follow. Do you have a method for working out what those documents say?
So there are a bunch of great resources out there. Actually, JewishGen, I think, is an incredible resource, as well as the particular research group from my area, the Częstochowa Radomsko area research group. And there are guides and tutorials. I would say JewishGen is full of them, or Kaleo links, where it teaches you how to read certain types of handwriting, or like what words to look for. I've also enlisted the help of the internet as well. So there's fantastic communities both on Facebook, Reddit. And of course, the JewishGen, where you can identify volunteers that will translate things for you. So that's been very helpful. But I have a huge thanks to say to the researchers at the research group that transcribe it into English, which has been insanely helpful. And then once you have the actual document, you can learn a little bit more about what's written. And to your point about languages, yes, I think you and I were looking at a record that was originally written in Russian, and then had Yiddish notes on it, since I believe it was a religious record. So very, very interesting, to be able to, see this type of, these languages used simultaneously.
So what's been the most surprising thing that you've learned about your family? Any skeletons in the closet at all?
It's funny you use that phrase. When I talk to people about family research, I would say, when they begin, I would say, well, if you're interested in skeletons in the closet, just acknowledge that before you move forward. And I think for me, there's been, incredible stories, and many happy and many sad as well. I found out that, my great grandmother came here, prior to Poland's inception in 1918. So she came here in 1913. None of her siblings, unfortunately, survived World War II. Many, at least one I can tell, was perished in Treblinka, as well as cousins as well. And that was an incredibly devastating thing to learn. Especially to understand a little bit more about her life, and looking at records where she tried to bring her family to the United States, but unfortunately, due to immigration quotas, they were denied. However, on the happy side of things, there was an amazing thing that happened that kind of rose from all of this trauma, is that I was able to find a record of her sister, who unfortunately, her and her husband perished in Auschwitz, but her daughter survived and stayed in Belgium. And that's how I learned of our second cousins that I had no idea about. And we recently reconnected for the first time. None of us had any idea that, the other existed. And it was a beautiful memory, beautiful experience. And not to mention my second cousins, but also my third and fourth cousins that I was able to meet from my great grandmother's cousins, who also left Poland, before or after the war.
And did you feel that connection when you spoke? Because I think the common ancestors is one thing, but do they feel like they're family? Because it's an interesting thing to find out, all of a sudden that you have a bunch of people in Belgium or wherever that belong to you, I guess.
I think that's a great question. Personally, yes, I would say so. I think, the conversations and, the incredible correspondence I've been able to have with this newly found extended family, I think piecing it all together, almost around our common ancestor was amazing. My great grandma's sister, and I found a bunch of records and research that I was able to share, with our newfound family. And I think that really kind of helped us piece together. Hearing their side of the family story was what really made it real for me, is their escape and unfortunate tragedy, but a beautiful story of survival and reconnection.
And can you, to an American, what does a journey like this do to your identity? Because we have been supporting many clients, such as yourself, through the journey of the presidential grant, which is a lot of work. It's a lot of work, a lot of genuine commitment, and also soul searching, if I can put it that way. So do you feel Polish? Is that what does it all mean to you is what I want to ask you, even though it's very, hopefully you don't feel too vulnerable, talking to the world about it. But I think that's the kind of question that people want to know. What is the commitment, and what does it give you, other than eventually, hopefully, you'll get your Polish passport, which is kind of become a bit secondary maybe now? Like, can you maybe tell us a bit more about that?
To be honest, I would agree. As much as it is my, desire to become a Polish citizen, I think from where I started in 2014 to where we're at today, 6 years later, having met family, having reconnected, and learning so much about, my grandmother, my great grandmother, that I never would have thought possible. I would say it almost does feel secondary, but I hold it to be very important. When it comes down to identity, I think the beautiful part of the melting pot in America is that everybody came, from somewhere, all in search of a better life, but their traditions, their language, their customs and culture really influenced what I perceive America to be today. And I think it's incredibly important that we don't lose that. Not only as an American, but as somebody who identifies as Polish Jewish. You know, there's so much history and tradition to be proud of. You know, my great grandmother was proud of it, and so am I.
And of course, you've been to Poland, and that's another question I want to ask. What did you think? Because you did go back to your ancestral home of Częstochowa, and there are many villages and towns that your family comes from. What did you feel when you got there?
You know, I think it was an interesting experience. You know, firstly, I'm definitely going back.
When we
I
can, when they let Americans in, right?
Yes, and I think you know, I absolutely loved Krakow, for example, getting to explore. You know, it was very impactful to me, and something that I have a goal to do is to return to the specific street, you know, to the apartment and the workshop where my great grandparents grew up and lived. You know,
What did they
and to
do for
me,
work? Sorry, Kenny. So you mentioned workshop. What did they do? What
so
profession?
they were tailors,
Okay.
and that's actually where the you know, Jewish Yiddish name Schlimmer comes from, Tanner Taylor. And so there's you know, there's a lot of history there, and I think that being there and being back really solidified it for me. Was understanding, you know, what this is where they grew up. You know, this is what they left, and you know, I got very emotional, especially when I visited Auschwitz, and you know, understanding
Tough.
that incredible trauma and pain that it must have been for my great grandmother to lose her siblings, you know, and but overcoming that, you know, and having, you know, a successful life and a beautiful family here, you know, I think is one of the greatest parts of my great grandmother's, you know, story of immigration.
So in Poland, did you feel at home? Was there a part of you that sort of thought, these are my people, these are my streets, these are my buildings, or are we working on it still?
I would like to think so. You know, and I think that of course the language will always be a little bit of a barrier. You know, I've heard, you know, as people immigrate and assimilate, you know, language is often some of the first things to go. But you know, I oftentimes heard, you know, Polish words, you know, Polish being spoken. So now for me to try and, you know, do my absolute best, you know, I feel like if I want to be a citizen truly, that, you know, I will learn as much Polish as I possibly can, likely for the rest of my life. Right.
Yeah.
So it's been something that I feel like as I progress in my studies in Polish, I feel much more connected, especially to the country, to the politics, you know, and to everything, the culture itself.
Because before we came on air, you were telling me that you speak a number of languages, including German and French and Spanish and English, of course. And Polish is tougher for English speakers to learn, of course, because it's a Slavic language, so it doesn't have many connections with languages such as English, except for Latin, maybe, or Greek, ancient Greek. So how is your journey to learning Polish? Because I know you've been studying diligently. What are some of the challenges, maybe, if you could tell us? I think apart from pronunciation, maybe, although I personally think you're doing a pretty good job.
Well, thank you. You know, I think some of the challenges, I mean, primarily, I think making the time and making it a priority is a pretty big deal. But I've been very fortunate to be able to have that opportunity. I was able to study briefly at the University of Washington, taking, you know, an introductory Polish class. I've been very fortunate to be involved with Seattle's local Polish community, Dom Polski, here, and, you know, the amazing, wonderful people that I've been able to meet. You know, have really kind of, you know, been a catalyst to that language learning journey as well, right? So when you get to you know, excuse me, use the language, you know, I think that's when you really kind of develop, you know, more of an intuition or a fluency to it. So additionally, you know, I know that another client of yours that we recently spoke about, unfortunately, I don't remember his name right now, but he made a fantastic video about, you know, his journey of learning Polish, and you know, I feel like that would be a great reference as well.
And what about food? We've got to talk about food, Kenny. What's your favorite Polish food?
Oh my goodness. I'm I'm a huge you know, pierogi and
Ah,
also, you know,
yes.
kielbasa fan. So you know, Dom Polski here in Seattle has incredible food. You know, they've got Polish delicatessens here, cafes, and you know, really, I think that my hands down favorite food might be zupa ugorkowa.
Oh wow,
Um,
that's a
so
that's
I think
a
that's
specialty.
delicious. Some of the best soup I've ever had. But of course, borscht as well. So, but yeah, pickle soup, stole my heart. So
Okay, okay, interesting, interesting. And have you done? Do you cook at all? At
I
home, or
do
you do?
a
Okay.
little bit. And I think that learning to cook has almost been, as fun of an adventure. They have a Facebook page in our local community that talks exclusively about Polish recipes, which
Okay.
has been really fun, to try at home and to be engaged with that. And there's significant overlap I found between Jewish food and Polish food as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
For latkes, for example.
Mm.
So there's, it feels like home cooking to me.
Right, right. Because essentially, whether it's the food or the language or the culture, there are many, many synergies. It's the two communities live side by side for like nearly 1,000 years, relatively in relative harmony. So I think it does need to be recognized that there are many similarities and lots of things Poles and Catholic Poles and Polish Jews have in common. Um, Tell us, were there any favorite places? You mentioned Krakow and Częstochowa, where your family is from. Any other places you could recommend for people to visit when they can?
I haven't had the chance to visit myself. I was, prior to the pandemic, I had plans to visit Gdynia this year as
Yeah.
part of the exchange,
Okay.
as Seattle and Gdynia are sister cities. And
Oh, I
so,
didn't know that.
yeah, it would have been a fantastic opportunity. Did a bunch of research on it, looked at photos, talked to people. Beautiful place, great place. Gdańsk as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel like I would definitely recommend people to go, although I've never personally been myself. But
Up north.
meeting some of my friends and their families, there's all these amazing and interesting places around Poland, very culturally, geographically diverse.
Okay. And we've got just a few minutes left, Kenny, but I wanted to ask you about your journey. I guess with us, with me, with Polaron, in terms of building your portfolio to be able to submit the application for presidential grant. Um, how are you finding it? And you can be you can be honest, because I know some of it is challenging in terms of getting documents together. And so if somebody, let's say, was considering embarking on that journey, and I know that quite a few people are watching for that very purpose, what would you say to them? Has it been hard? Has it been relatively easy? Has it been fun? What would you say?
I think it's been all three of those things actually. And I remember when we first talked, that I felt like Polaron was very upfront with me, that this is not an easy task, right?
Mm.
And I've also been, fortunate enough, through operating my blog, which I really should keep up on more.
Yes.
But
Yes.
getting to talk to a lot of people that reach out to me with these particular questions,
Mm.
what is the process like? So I've been very fortunate to meet great people, have some good phone calls, conversations, and try and share my experience. I think that since I've started, just the process itself has undergone a major overhaul, to my
Mm.
understanding, whereas
Mm-hmm.
previously you used to have to go through the confirmation process prior, but
Yeah.
now that that's no longer a condition, I think that it streamlines it and makes it a little easier.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that when it comes down to the challenging piece, just firstly obtaining the documentation, even in your home country. So for the United States, for example,
Right.
every document I had needed to be sent in additionally to be apostilled, so it could be recognized internationally.
Mm.
Um, Finding those documents. Not even in the U.S. in Poland, I was very fortunate that this particular town, Częstochowa, is an incredible archival and research project going. So that really helped bring things a lot together. But you're right. I think compiling, the data, finding out new facts, you're talking to family members, looking for, anything that you can really find useful, but also just the stories. And, it's been very satisfying,
Mm.
gratifying, of course. I think my best piece of advice is that if you're truly committed to it, that I believe it will pay off.
Mm.
And
Mm.
of course, I hope that case for myself, right? I feel like I've invested, quite a bit of my time. And
Mm.
I think that I don't expect anything in return because, like you said, it's been an incredible, experience from start to finish. But of course, I hope for a positive outcome. So, embrace your local community, get engaged. I think all of those have been fantastic things. Everybody has their own timeline. It's a fun task. It's a challenging task. It's a rewarding task.
And Kenny, what does your family say? Are they sort of looking at you thinking, oh my God, what's he gone and done? Or are they supportive? Are they interested? Are they what?
Some of my family know, some of my family, may not know. And I love to talk about it with anybody that'll listen. I think, like I said, I'm from Idaho. I grew up on a farm. And so when I told my dad this, I think he was relatively surprised.
Yeah.
Same thing with my uncle. I think I didn't think I don't know if you can fully anticipate, having a sudden interest like this. And of course, I was very interested in 2014, but as I delved more into the family story, that's when I really maintained that interest, is like, I want to learn everything about it. Right. So I think that really kind of helped explain things. Is, of course, it started from curiosity and a genealogical perspective, but as I started to, explore my own identity more, this is part of who I am. It's part of how I was raised and how I grew up. And, this is something that I don't want to lose, especially this connection to my mother and her side of the family and my great grandmother, who was an incredible and strong woman. To me, that's one of the most important ways that I can almost bring, honor to her memory.
And such a noble, admirable thing to say. Have you met your great grandmother or not?
Unfortunately,
No.
I did not. She passed before I was born, but she played a major role in raising my mother, along with my grandmother, of course. But my mother and her were best friends, and they really got along. And of course, my grandmother's, or excuse me, my great grandmother's, native language being Polish, of course, that had a significant influence and impact on how my mom was raised, and subsequently how she turned around and raised me. So I feel this amazing connection there.
Well, hopefully she's looking up from wherever and cheering you on. We've got some questions, Andrew. I think, believe it or not, we are 20 minutes into our little chat. So I'll hand over to Andrea for questions, please.
Thank you. So we have two questions that are somehow linked. So the first one will be, in addition to Polaron's help, that's for Kenny, have you also used Ancestry.com or MyHeritage.com to locate extended family members during your search through those 6 years? If so, what facets of those databases were most helpful for you?
That's a fantastic question. So as I think maybe almost anybody in the genealogy world would start out, Ancestry, of course, was where I began, and that's where I continue to maintain my trees, as well as using other sources. Right, Ancestry really helped me establish my family's footprint and documentation in the United States. Ancestry is where I found Esther's record of immigration through Ellis Island. So truly, that's where I was really able to find the immigration records, and then of course the census records. That talked about, what language did they speak? What addresses did they live at? Obituaries through newspapers.com, where they were buried, looking at their matseva or headstones. So Ancestry had a huge foundation here in the States. When it came down to the other ones, I did use Family Search. I've used, DNA to try and triangulate, certain cousins, or potential links or matches. So lots of opportunities there. I also want to encourage anybody with Ancestry, in Europe, to use Genie or Jenny, because oftentimes you can find trees in Russian or Polish, and I've been fortunate enough to connect with some very distant cousins through that route as well.
Second question, thank you, Kenny. Once you have a birthplace of one or more family members, does Polaron help to investigate resources in those places in Poland or the area pre-Poland?
We do.
So,
go on.
Oh, go for it.
No, Kenny, you're first. I'll add afterwards.
Okay. I would say, I think it was a combination for my case, right? Because we started with the research. Like I said, using Jewish Gen, I found the town name from my great grandma and her family on a census, actually. And then I sent a letter to the archives. They responded, and I sent it back to Polaron. And Polaron was able to pick up from there and order all of these documents, which was amazing. So that's my personal experience. But I'll turn it back to you, Eva.
Yeah, thank you. So what I was going to add there is that with the grant applications, there's no minimum burden of proof. So it's up to you what you're going to give the Polish government, essentially. And in Kenny's case, he's been able to go back many, many generations. I think you said 8, but it's not necessary, if you know what I mean. It just depends how far back we can go. But it's not like the Polish government gives you a list of all the generations you have to go back to. What you put in your application is up to you. And in some cases, we're able to go back really extensively and find records dating back hundreds of years. You know, we have a couple of families with, you know, noble provenance where I think in one of them, we've been able to go back to 1263. So that's just, yeah, mind-blowing, but it's not the case for everybody. So it's not about how far back you can go. It's showing that commitment and, you know, sourcing documents that are able to paint that picture. And they don't necessarily have to be from Poland either, because, you know, it just depends what happened to people. Some, you know, if someone was a laborer or a farmer, they didn't have many documents. So they may have arrived in America with very little. So we can go back to church records. So in the case of people that were Jewish, to online databases. So it is labor of love. I think that's one way I would describe it, where it's an individual journey for everybody. So you can't, there's no prescription or, you know, sort of like a checklist that we can give you of what to supply. But as you heard in Kenny's case, it's years of research, but it's not, you know, required per se to do. However, if you do have a look at Kenny's blog, which I'm happy to share with people, if Kenny's happy to share, I know that he shared with many other people. It in painstaking detail shows you what he's found, like everything's annotated. And to such a wonderful extent that you can clearly see who's related to whom, what the documents say, where they were found. And Kenny's already mentioned sort of reading between the lines. There's so much you can discover through ancestral documents that you wouldn't even think. So for example, whether, you know, for example, looking at someone's signature on a piece of paper, such as, I don't know, naturalization records will tell you a lot more about them. So for example, if some people couldn't sign because they were illiterate, there would be a thumbprint. Other people will have this beautiful educated signature. So that in itself, you know, if you pay attention to how the documents are presented, will tell you a lot more about your family. And then it's like a fishing expedition. You know, you cast your net or your fishing line, and then who knows what comes back. And then it expands to other areas, to other towns, other names. There's so much that you can discover through just looking at documents that it's quite amazing.
Thank you. The other question I wanted to bring to the discussion is it's regarding the application of the presidential grant. So we know the applying for a presidential grant involves proving that you have a lot of engagement with the Polish culture and your heritage. And so the question will be for Kenny, how have you proved that? What you have done in regards to that?
You know, I think that's a fantastic question, because it's a question I asked myself as well. You know, if this is something that I truly want and something that I desire, you know, how can I become engaged? I think when I initially moved to Washington 3 years ago, I'd never really had a lot of access to a Polish community, and I had done a lot of engagement, you know, online over the internet. But when I moved here and I got in touch with, you know, the Dom Polski organization, the Polish Home, you know, I was, you know, I was astounded by how much was available. You know, for example, I'm currently doing Polish, you know, intermediate language classes through Zoom right now, which is a great thing. It was all organized by the Polish Home. Not to mention the festivals. We have the Polish Festival, of which I was the social media manager for last year. Unfortunately, this year's festival has been postponed due to the pandemic, and I hope to be engaged next year as well, and years to come, because the festival is an amazing place to partake in Polish culture, to learn about Polish culture, and bring it, to everybody. Everybody is welcome. So that, not to mention the pierogi festival, which was delicious.
There's one? Wow.
Or perhaps vodka tasting at the Polish festival. So there's many avenues, to I feel like get engaged and really embrace it. I do feel like visiting Poland as well was something that really solidified it for me. This is something I really wanted to do. This is a connection that I felt, so through all of those ways, I hope that I've been able to engage, because it's been nothing but a pleasure for me with all the amazing people that I've met.
And that just really nicely summarizes our chat this morning. And I think, Kenny, one of the greatest ambassadors, I guess, of that reconnection that people may or may not make. But I think it's an individual journey that everybody that wants to embark on it needs to reconcile with and decide what it means for themselves. There's lots available. Polish people are very hospitable. When they see you making an effort at speaking the language, learning about the culture, learning about the food, connecting, they will embrace you. It is a matter of deciding if it is something you want to do, because I think, just going back to the application, it needs to be a sincere, genuine effort, and it'll be recognized as such. So on that note, Kenny, I wanted to thank you really sincerely for being part of this. Again, I think you're just the greatest ambassador of, and thank you for being so kind about our work. I know that it's challenging at times because of how much there is to do. But we wish you all the best in Atlanta, which is where you're moving in about a week. And we'll send, if people are interested in your blog, we will definitely share that with people, because it's a massive undertaking that really journals your, your story, which is great to see.
Absolutely. And thank you as well, Ava, and to the entire Polaron team, Andrea as well. Thank you guys for your time. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Have a great evening.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.